Welcome back, everybody, to the Aaron's High Cap Adventure Radio program. Again, it's October 13th, 2018. I'm here live with Attorney Extraordinary Benton Watson. This segment is sponsored by Coppolino Dodd Krebs Law Firm. We can't thank him enough. Ross, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Great to be back, man.
All right,
tell you what.
Man, you're looking sharp, dude. You're looking sharp.
Got my very patriotic uniform on today.
I like it.
Yes, sir.
We have a bunch of stuff to go over, don't we?
Yeah, you asked me a lot. I think when you do your...
When do I not ask you a lot?
Ah, man, you get more free legal advice than anybody. No, you asked some good questions.
You know, you're joking around. I keep telling these people who are listening, you guys are crazy if you don't call. You got expert attorneys on. You can ask questions, and he won't bill you. They don't have your address. They can't bill you, all right? So we don't call our ID. We're not going to follow you down. So give us a call, 254-697-6633. Go ahead.
So I think you just sit up at night sometimes and just philosophize.
You are watching
Augustus McCrae. Oh, and just in front of the fire with biscuits and whiskey and just get these questions and then ask me about them. But some of them are good questions, and they go...
Some of them are good questions?
Some of them. Most of them are. But they go... A lot of these, I think, today, and a lot of them go to the very foundation, the very fundamentals of why someone wants to be a lawyer, what your ultimate underlying duty as a lawyer are. And that's why... Before we went into anything, I kind of wanted to start with the story of Bushell's case. Okay, and the story of Bushell's case is about 1670 in England, and the congregation shows up to Grace Church, and they're going to have their proceeding, and they're going to pray and do what they do, and what the Quakers, that was at this time the Quakers were going to have their congregational meeting. And when they get there in the morning, there are chains crisscrossed and hanging on the door, and there's a bunch of dragoons just in a tight rank guarding the doorway. Nobody can get in. And the parishioners are concerned, what's going on? Why can't we get into church? And the captain of the cadre says to the parishioners, by order of the king, right, there's going to be no more services because it's treason, because at that time, right, Charles II wanted to dominate the world, and it was the time of English imperialism, and so Quakers wouldn't fight, and so this was a threat to the crown because they would basically recruit soldiers away from the king's army. And so he had declared it would be unlawful to preach, right, if you were a Quaker, okay, and have services and to be a Quaker, essentially, right, because that was a threat to the crown. And so they politely ask and plead for the officers to please let them, go ahead with their services, and they don't. And so William Penn decides he's just going to preach on the side of the road. And so he begins to preach, and before you know it, the captain yells for him to be arrested. Well, Officer Meade is also either a Quaker or somewhat sympathetic to their cause, and he says he will not do it. And long story short, they ended up charging them both with treason. Which in those times could end up, being drugged and cut in half and beheaded and all kinds of things. And so then they take them to trial. And what they did in trial those days is they would just send officers out and arrest people off the street to be jurors. They would just simply come in and would take the first people they see on the street, and they would arrest them and bring them into court, and then they would have to decide the cause. And jurors know, right, what it is that they're going to have to do, and that they know that if they don't do what the king wants, that they're going to be in trouble for imprisonment. So a couple of these jurors, even knowing that they're about to be arrested, grabbed a couple of pieces of bread and a flask and went on ahead in. And they get in there and see Edward Bushell, right, was a prominent juror, and he understood that what was right and wrong. He was a successful shipman, and he even helped get Jews out of certain places during the Catholic Inquisition, and he understood what was right and wrong. And so he pleads after the case to these jurors, and he pulls out a copy of the Magna Carta, and he says these are rights ordained by God, natural inherent rights, religious beliefs, freedom of speech, right to assembly, right, and we cannot do this. And long story short, they end up not letting these jurors leave. They end up giving a verdict basically of guilty, but of speaking to an assembly, not treason, and then finding the soldier not guilty. And they ended up not letting them leave, and they ended up starving them to death. and it ends up that one of the jurors, the foreman, Mr. Veer, is so frail and weak because he hasn't eaten in several days that the judge demands that they give a verdict, and his last dying breath on the courtroom floor is not guilty. And so as it continues to go on, these jurors say that we're not going to find them guilty, and the two congregations are trying to get them food and water, and it just so happens that fate has these two congregations come together at the same time, at the same jail, at the same fort. And so they then plot a plan to get food in and feed them, and Barbara Bailey, one of the other jurors' daughter, goes and entices one of the soldiers, and she gets a key, and it all works out somehow perfectly. Right, just this time where they extend these jurors' lives, and this case just continues to go on and on and on, and it comes, and they finally get a good lawyer from down across the nation, and he comes across and figures out how to do what we call a writ of habeas corpus. Right, ends up getting the law changed about that no jury shall be imprisoned for its verdict. Right, and by the end of the case, only 6 jurors were alive.
Wow,
out of 12, and so. I think that this case...
You're a good storyteller.
This case speaks to the heart of everything about the justice system, and about... I've often talked about the Star Chamber and how the king would often use the Star Chamber as a means of... See, there was different courts, and so the Star Chamber was meant to be a court of equity. So it was meant to right the wrongs of other courts, and it was meant to basically... oversee really the important and very famous high-profile nobility, because the common people didn't like the nobility, and so they would convict them of anything. And so it was really there to be a fair court, and it ended up being something, an instrument of what we call oppression, an instrument of oppression. Okay, and so that trend went on, and that's why we have the American Revolution. That's why the Quakers came to America. It's why we have those ordained rights, those inherent rights: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the presumption of innocence, the right to a jury trial, all of these things.
Can you play patriotic music in the background?
This kind of situation goes to the very heart, because your first question was, right, what is innocent unless proven guilty? And I want to make clear that a lot of people will say you're presumed innocent until...
You told me that last time. And this is the whole reason I brought this up. I can't remember what it was. It was either on TV, it was movie, it was something I was watching, and it said, innocent until. And I go, no. Ross said no, that's not right, and I totally understand it. And that's why it's the first one on my list.
So yeah, one of the first questions we asked the jurors, that if the judge said, right, we're going to eat, we're not going to eat until we reach a verdict. That's a whole lot different than saying we're not going to eat unless we reach a verdict, because that until implies that it's going to happen. Okay, right, and the unless makes it clear that no, it may not happen at all. Okay, and in fact, that's not where we stand, and you're going to have to get there. Okay, and so these are things that, yes, go to the very heart. And so the presumption of innocence, yeah, I mean, it goes back really even before that. You're going to find stuff in Leviticus, the Justinian Code, the Greeks, right? And it really comes down to a rule of common sense. And I don't want to say names or say too many facts, but essentially I had a family law case where my client's, soon-to-be ex was saying that he stole something of hers. Right, like a ring or some object, and he's like, how am I gonna show that I didn't do that? Exactly. How do you prove a negative? You can't. And so that's the problem. That's how this rule essentially came about, and is why so many different nations have seen, even Russia, right, and Iran, right, and China, okay, all have the presumption of innocence. Okay, in their codes today. And it's because everybody understands it's unfair to try to make a person disprove a fact, especially when if you're innocent, you're not going to know anything about context about what happened. You're not going to be able to defend yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you how much it has opened my vision, Ross's explanation of until or unless. I've always been a stickler for definitions. a word, I want to make sure I understand my conversation. If I don't know a word, I look it up to understand its full meaning. That's why when I'm giving opinion pieces or whatever, and I'm using key words, I'll give you the definition so we're all on the same sheet of music. But it's amazing that when you, just that, explaining it to me, Ross, makes me look at every other word in the law to understand what are you talking about. It's just like the Bible. You can take a verse out of the Bible anywhere, make it into anything you want, and twist the context of it. You got to know the before and the after, and this is what we're doing right here. So I think this is fantastic. That's why you're crazy if you don't call up at 254-697-6633 or subscribe to my YouTube channel at aaronsgunshop.com. Go ahead, Em.
Yeah, and so then I think that explains it well, right? And then you got to remember, beyond a reasonable doubt means that one possibility that's reasonable, even one, okay, then the verdict is not guilty. Okay, and so if it's even one reasonable possibility, right, that it's something else other than what the government's saying.
Can I ask a
right,
question?
Then it's not guilty.
What's the difference between reasonable doubt and the preponderance of the evidence?
Reasonable doubt's going to be, like I said, one thing in your mind at all. But one reasonable possibility.
But doesn't preponderance of the evidence still leave gaps of being possible?
Preponderance of the evidence is it more likely than not?
I know, but then there's that little segment of doubt, right? That goes back to what you just said.
But it's you're looking at it from an opposite point of view. Is it more likely than not that they did it? On the other hand, it doesn't matter. They can show as much as they want to if there's even one reasonable possibility.
Does that go to certain types of cases as compared to the preponderance of the evidence?
That's why I don't even know why lawyers try to explain beyond a reasonable doubt as a percentage, whereas preponderance of the evidence is 50.01%. Is it 50.01%, right, to that side?
Well, I would assume that without a shadow of a doubt being life or death situation, as compared to somebody stole something, I need a preponderance of the evidence. Would that be where you put those?
Anytime you're talking about a criminal act, okay, it's gonna invoke the presumed innocent unless proven guilty and beyond a reasonable doubt standard. Okay. When we're talking about the civil aspect,
okay,
right? So like family law,
I got you.
Contract claims,
criminal versus civil. Okay, I got you.
Okay, then you're going to have preponderance of the evidence standard more likely than not. In some cases, like taking children away, you're going to have a clear and convincing evidence standard, which is just something more than it's something higher than more likely or not.
Well, I mean, if you don't do it right, it could be a criminal act, taking kids away from a certain parent, so that would be...
Well, that's what we ask jurors a lot of times, right? What kind of proof would you want if the state was going to take your kids away? And they'll say, I want a lot of proof. A lot of proof, right? And then they'll say, well, beyond a reasonable doubt is higher than that. Okay. Much higher than that. Okay, and so... I think that goes to the question, but then you had asked me, well, why, if someone is innocent, presumed innocent, unless proven guilty, then how can they be held in bail, right?
I have an idea, but I want to know the reality of it.
Okay, so there's two different competing, theories, and there's two different policies at play here. Okay, and really at the beginning of that. At that initiation, yes, you have some of those constitutional rights, but that bail is going to fall under a different set, okay? And a lot of lawyers are going to tell you, a lot of good criminal lawyers, even good ones, are going to tell you that we have no constitutional right to bail in Texas. But I don't think that's true stated in those terms, but that's not really what they mean, and so to speak. But there is constitutional requirements in the course of bail. It cannot be used as an instrument of oppression. Okay, and that's in the Texas Constitution itself. Okay, that bail cannot be used as an instrument of oppression. But you need bail, okay, because otherwise we would hold the person in jail, right, until there was a verdict. Because there would be no way for us to secure their presence, right, and make sure that the process is followed through with.
But that's what I'm getting at. I'm being very picky here. If you're innocent unless proven guilty, how come you're incarcerated? I understand because it looks pretty darn convincing and we don't want you to be a flight risk or something like that. But is that the only reason why you would incarcerate somebody who's still not proven guilty yet?
Tampering with evidence, messing with witnesses, other danger to the community. There's several factors that go into bail. Okay, and I mean... That's why there's been a big push for bail reform, and I think some of this can be explained through a discussion of that. I don't definitely do not agree with the bail reform camp. In fact, I think that bail bondsmen have a close ties to the community. They're the ones that the bail reform is saying that it's unjust because it lets the rich get out while the indigent have to stay in, and that's not necessarily true at all. In fact, right, the bail bondsmen are going to help the poor be able to pay, because if that were true, the rich could afford to make bail. Bondsmen cover, right, the amount that bail is for a smaller fee, a set amount of fee from 5 to 10%, right, or even less than that.
They're providing a service at a risk,
right, and they're covering the risk, and you're paying a lower price. If somebody's got money, they can put up property and get out without having to use a bail bondsman. Okay, and there's other reasons why, like family members, so to speak, wouldn't get them out on bail, and that would be because they're on drugs and they don't want them to have a danger, because they may be violent, because, right, they've done it before and there may be a flight risk, because the family's just tired of putting up with it. Maybe maybe tough love, so to speak. But there's all kinds of reasons why that there are people just sitting in jail. But the statistics have shown that most of those people are going to be more violent, right, for more violent crimes. And it's not just going to be for small misdemeanors, although that does happen. Okay, and so, I mean, when we're talking about bail reform too, what happened, there was a Fifth Circuit case that ruled, that it was actually a district court case that held the bail procedure in Harris County to be unconstitutional. And what they were doing is they had this list, and it said basically it set an amount for each kind of case, right? Amount to set for bail. And by the way, if you don't know what bail is just the amount of security, right, that it takes, right, the amount of money or some kind of property that it takes to secure your presence at trial later. Okay, and so it is security basically for you, and you make sure that you show up. Okay, and so the courts are going to set, right, an amount that's just based on the charge, based on the flight risk, based on who you are. Well, Harris County wasn't looking at any other factors. They were just following that list every time, and it got so busy, and they just had administrative judges doing it, and then they're supposed to do the hearings next day, and they weren't. They were just going through the list, boom, 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 next person. They weren't letting them present evidence or anything like that, and some girl ends up getting a $2,500 bail, not being able to make bail on a driving while her license was invalid. Okay, and that was absurd. And so, for the facts of that case, yeah, I think that something should have been done. But what the district court did was completely outlaw, right, bail in misdemeanor cases, right, and then other cases as well. And so it ends up having to go to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit upholds it in that case, says the procedures are wrong, they need to fix the procedures, but did not just totally say you can't do bail. It's too broad of a reading. But what is interesting about this story is what happened in the meantime. And so what Harris County found that they were doing is people, right, were getting arrested on a misdemeanor charge where there could be no bail, right? So they had to put them out on personal recognizance bond. Well, then they wouldn't show up to court. And then so they would get rearrested, right, for the FTA, but it's a misdemeanor, so they had to make PR bond. So they just keep getting in and out, in and out, in and out. There's absolutely nothing that the court system could do because they found that bail was unconstitutional.
Wow. That's crazy.
Okay, and so, yes, bail bondsmen serve an absolute service to the community. And let me tell you something else. So they're trying to do bail reform, okay, in California. Bail reform, and that would be pretrial services, counselor check-ins, electronic monitoring, like phone check-ins, things like that. Other kinds of services, right? Like maybe some grassroots, right, involvement. It all sounds great, okay? $3 billion budget. That's just, right, to implement pretrial services. Okay, and the effects of pretrial services, there's this so-called assessment that they have that was done. There's been several studies done after that to show that those assessments have they're not verified. We have no idea how they're going to turn out. The test showed, there's been one study that showed it absolutely false. There's no way that assessment's going to work. The other one said it had about the same results as we get today from judges just making an on-the-spot discretionary call. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean,
you know, Ross, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking you're an expert in your field, I'm an expert in my field, and I know that if I take a gap in my learning in my field, the way the times are now with technology and the way things are going. If I got out of the system for 6 months, I'd be so far behind the curve. I'm looking at you spitting this stuff out and thinking, my God, man, how do you do it? How do you retain all that information? And if you were to step back for 6 months, you'd probably be miles behind because of all the new stuff that's happening in the legal system, wouldn't you?
Oh man, yeah. That's what we have continuing legal education.
And I'm saying this because, ladies and gentlemen, you need a good attorney if something goes down. So that's why, Rick sponsors his program. He does a great, fantastic job with his law firm. Ross here does an excellent job. They're both aggressive in their own way. And
I would say DC too. So DC, I think, is more telling because it's supposed to be one of the best pretrial services programs.
You know, I'm complimenting you. You cut me
No, because I wanted to. I think this is a good. I didn't even think about talking about it today. I'm glad we got on topic. I think people should know that the DC pretrial is supposed to be one of the best, non-bail kind of programs in the United States, and it's supposed to be top notch, and the gold standard essentially, and the numbers were just analyzed, and it came out that it was 68 million, okay, and based on the number of people in jail that they have, right, it turned out to be $5,666 per incarceree, per each person that's incarcerated.
That costs the public.
Costs the public in tax dollars.
Wow, jeez.
Right, okay, and so
they should spend that money on teaching people to properly upbring children. That would be go much further.
And so, see, your bail bondsman covered that cost, right? And they're the ones that's covering that cost right now. And they're the ones that if they don't show up, they're making sure they get to court. And look, bail bondsmen have ties to the community. They have ties to the political system. They have ties to the legal community, right? They have ties to other helpful aspects because they have to, right? The network of bail bondsmen has to be broad and wide because if you run, they have to know how to go find you. They have to know how to get funding. They have to know, right, where to go and how to deal with public officials. They have to know all these things. And so actually when people come to them, they're more helpful than just the aspect of bail. Okay, and so, I mean, I think that, right, bail is a good thing, right? I think that, yes, sometimes it can be used as an instrument of oppression. We talked about how can you set this kid, right, in a $100 million bond. That's ridiculous.
That has nothing to do with the bonds person.
That has to do with the judges. And so then you get a lawyer involved, just like they did in Bushell's case, right? Mm-hmm. Sir Richard, okay, it comes in and says, Judge, I'm filing writ of habeas corpus. This is unreasonable. This is unconstitutional. Right? Under the 8th Amendment, it's unconstitutional in the Texas Constitution. Okay, and so, I mean...
And we're very fortunate here in Milan County. We've got twin pistol bail bonds. So if you have a need for a bail bondsman, we have our very own right here. So, and they sponsor the program. Thank you very much.
And what else did you ask me? Hearsay, and that goes into the same kind of hearsay rules in public. And I think you asked me about hearsay and how do you get a jury in a high profile public case, and
this one here too. How do you counter public opinion?
Pieces like in a profile case, and so yeah, hearsay is any out of court statement, okay, made by someone else who is other than I used to say
Kavanaugh would be a perfect example. She said he did it. He said he did it.
Several years back, absolutely, and so. In criminal law, you're going to have the 6th Amendment right? And you're going to have the right to confront the witnesses against you. That goes back to Sir Walter Raleigh, right, who was accused of treason and accused of plotting against, I think it was Elizabeth I. It was one of the queens of England, and his best friend, essentially, was the one who signed the complaint against him and was the one who made the complaint that he was a successor, not a successor, but involved, right, in the plot, the assassination plot, and he represented himself. He says, I demand to bring my accusers before me. I demand it on my life. Let me confront them and let them speak. Okay, and they didn't. Okay, the court did not let them speak. They kept him silent, did not let the accusers testify, and there was no way for him to prove his case, and it all goes back to, right, innocent unless proven guilty. Okay, and so in a criminal case, because if it's an out-of-court statement, right, and you're not able to confront that witness in court, right, that's not going to be admissible, but everything else, judges let in hearsay. If it's hearsay, judges let it in.
You'll be happy to know in the 23rd century, according to Star Trek movies, that Captain Kirk gets to face his accuser. So the law is still going on.
That's great.
All right,
And so,
I have
yeah.
another one here too. How do you set a juror in a case that is nationally recognized? How do you get jurors for a case like that?
So this is where I just find that the
Got a couple minutes.
and it was like when we talk about the opinion from Scalia when we talk about the Second Amendment. Oh, fuck.
It's okay. Join the club. I've been doing this all day.
Okay, and we spoke about, and I talked about when I read the Constitution, it didn't really stand out, but then when I read Scalia's opinion, it was just like aha, right? How it's one of those things where the right to bear arms was a naturally inherent right, and that's why it said shall not be infringed. Because it was already pre-existing. It pre-existed. It already existed. So shall not be infringed. And so it's things like that when I catch those things that I just get goosebumps when I read them. And when it comes to me. And so it was the same thing. A lot of times we'll say a fair and impartial jury. A fair and impartial jury.
Does that mean there's empty seats in the jury? Impartial?
That's not. So the thing, look. The Constitution.
I got a shirt that says, "What part of shall not infringe don't you understand?" You know, it's a great shirt. Love, man, love. Right,
and but that's not actually what the rules are, and that's not actually what it says, and that's not actually what we're asking for. We're not asking for a fair jury. What the Constitution says is an impartial jury, right? Meaning that it's not all leaned towards that one side. It's not all right towards it's not picked by the king. We don't just go out and arrest jurors right under the threat of prosecution if they don't find you guilty and make them right biased to your side. And I have a right to question and ask jurors and make sure they have no internal biases before they're picked. Okay, but I'm not looking for a fair jury. In fact, my former colleague Clyde Chandler is a great lawyer, really good at picking a jury, one of the best I've ever seen, even in the big time lawyers, right? He could pick a jury like nobody else. And one of the things he used to say all the time, he said, "I am not looking for a fair jury."
That makes total sense, man.
He said, "I'm looking for people that's going to listen to me. I'm looking for people that's going to listen to my client's side of the story."
See, I'm not looking for a fair news agency either. I'm looking for one that gives me the facts so I can make the decision. And we don't get that. I'm segueing into my interview segment about fake news, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay, and so I mean, yes, and there's avenues to do that. You can question the jurors at length. Ultimately, yeah, a juror can lie to you and sabotage your case, and there are some jurors with agendas, right? But there are several processes to make sure you do get a juror, even in a high public profile case. There's even a way to transfer venue, what we call transfer it to a different place. If it's a high-profile national news kind of thing, obviously you're going to run into problems, but a lot of people still don't listen to that.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, and just like that one case down in Florida about the girl who killed her baby, I mean, it was high-profile, still found not guilty. Okay, and so, I mean, you can get jurors to be fair and listen to your side, and again, it's not about guilt or what. It's not about did you do it or didn't do it. It's about did the government prove its case.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I have another question down here that says anything else. Here's my anything else question. In your opinion, Ross, do you feel that the laws of this country are good, or can they be, let me try and clarify, are the laws that we have good and there's just some bad ones that by some weird reason they're not that great? Or do the ones that aren't good, are they put in there by people maliciously, or is it just one of those things that happen and you got to fix it?
So,
as compared to like the king saying, we're going to have this because I want it in my favor, are there people up in the positions of power who can actually make laws for beneficial reasons to themselves or their thought process? Or is it just something that happens in time where it becomes a bad law?
Again, like we talked about the Fourth Amendment, the founding fathers knew that over time, slowly, what government tends to do is eat more and more and more of the rights, and the government grows, and they predicted that it would do this, and it has to the exact T, like they said. There's more regulations, more agencies being created every day. How many more laws have been on the books? We talked about the millions and millions of laws that are on the books. Okay,
but I can understand at a certain point in the growth of a country and a nation, and different industries, there might have to be.
Yes, and Rick Dodd will tell you that some of those regulations are very great. They're absolutely needed. There's no way that we could use technology, right, without it being a danger to ourselves unless we had those regulations. Yes, so yes, in some degree that's true, but there are other times when we get into vague and notice problems and just extreme being overwhelmed, and then the judges being unfair, applying stuff and not abiding by the inherent natural law, the constitutional law, right? But hinging on some kind of technicality. And a lot of times it's worked both ways. Sometimes the defense gets a technicality when the government is the one that's in the right, and a lot of times, right, the defense, right, can never, right, go on the constitutional founding, right, because it's simply being ignored. And when we're talking about civil cases, right, it's the same way. And a lot of times it depends on politics of the parties. I mean, and it's just, and a lot of times the law hasn't caught up with technology yet. That's a big problem that we're still working on.
We talked about that a couple of times here.
And I mean, generally, I think that it is good. I think that maybe we need to step back and go back to. I'm an originalist, a contextualist even, and so I think that, right, I respect the constitutions. And so when you're talking to a person like me, and there's several different schools of thought, but when you're talking to somebody like me, that's my outline.
That's what this show's all about. I don't want to take anybody's liberties and freedoms.
Exactly.
I just want to protect the one that gives you the right to do your freedoms. So when you have the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and somebody, government or whoever, chipping away at it, that's what I'm fighting. Do I care if you like guys like guys? I don't care, man. I'm not your God. I don't judge you. I care about that piece of paper, that precious document that says you have the right to be free in this country, and it puts the government in check. And when it goes out of bounds, it's people like me and others, many other who are way greater than me, who try to keep it into check. So we're out of time, Ross. Tell everybody how we can get.
You guys come down to the Steaktoberfest today in Cameron. There's a big, all kinds of booths and things going on down at the square. We got some steak, 44 Farm Steaks dinner going on tonight. A little get together. I think fireworks even out there. So bring the kids out. 44 Farms hot dogs. I'm not advertising for 44 Farms. I'm going to say though they're the best hot dog I've ever had. It's a Big Link. Get the Big Link hot dog right with the bacon jam on it. Anyway, awesome. That's awesome. Anyway, so yeah, come out and see us all. I'll be out there too. And if otherwise, we love questions. Email me, Benton@Watson.legal. That's Benton@Watson.legal. Make sure you leave your phone number so I can call you, or you can call me if you want to schedule an appointment at 254-605-4140. It's 254-605-4140. Or come by and see us 105 East Main Street, or call for an appointment. Thank you, guys.
Sounds great.
And Rick, thank you so much, Rick Dodd.
Fantastic. Okay, Joel, let's take a break and.